9:00, maybe 9:05. I see that people are getting into. We need to start. What I would like to do today, and that Bezrat Hashem, what we are going to do for the following shiurim, at least 2 or 3 shiurim that I will give. I don't know exactly when. I think in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whenever it is, but whenever the schedule is. I called it, or I titled it. The general title is Halacha, Kehila, Vemoderna. Jewish law, community, and the modern world. And what I did is that I picked few sugiyot that I think are very interesting. And I think what I would like to do is few things. A, to discuss what happened obviously in ancient times and to see how the rabbis dealt with it. And then to show you how some of the same questions, as we say in Hebrew, ota geveret beshinui aderet, which means it's the same question, just different names, maybe a little bit of different circumstances, but the core question is the same one. The second thing is that I would like to accomplish with this series of classes is to basically show the delicate line between Jewish law, halacha, community, and modernity, or I would say, should I say, social circumstances. And the third idea that we're going to deal with will be I will call it the reciprocity between the individual and the society, between the individual and the community. We know that the community needs to support the individual obviously needs to support the community, but sometimes when few individuals or a group of individuals do something wrong, then the question of the society and the congregation, the community, is how to respond to it. What to do? Should they continue to support them? Should they condemn them? Should they ignore them? So those are the issues that we are going to deal with. So if I bring the source sheet, so we'll see the first question. So the first question is, and this is the title here, האם יש חובה לעזור למנוע מיהודי שהחליט לחטוא? Is there an obligation to try to prevent a Jew? I'm not talking now about a katan, a minor. A minor is a different question. This is a question of האם בית דין מצווים להפריש קטן אוכל נבלות. This is a different question that we will deal with it, not today. והאם מותר להקל על חטאו? So what are the two questions? The two questions are, we know that a Jew would like to commit a sin. What should we do? Should we try to prevent him or her from doing so? Should we try to make it more lenient? Should we try to soften the avera? What should we do when you hear that, there is a Jew, he or she would like to commit a sin, which can be, very large, or it can be very severe, or it can be very light. That's not the question now, but he or she would like to commit a sin. And the idea is what should we do as a community? So let's see. We'll start from the Gemara, and we'll take our time to understand the Gemara, because really that's the core source for the future development. So let's see. So it says like that. Gemara in Baba Kama in Daf Samechet. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan, one of the great sages of Eretz Israel in the 3rd century, he says the following: Gazal velo nityashu be'alim. If someone stole and the Be'alim didn't give up yet, which the Be'alim says, we don't give up on this object, we are going to do everything we can in order to get it. So what do we have? So it's an interesting question. Why? Why is that an interesting question? Because on one hand, where is the object? The object is now in Reuven's property. Reuven is the Gazlan. Reuven is the thief. By the way, you know what's the difference between Ganav and Gazlan? Gazlan is by force in the middle of the day. Ganav mostly come at night and just take it without confronting the owner. So what do we have? We have Reuven is the Gazlan, so he has the object in his property, in his possession. However, Shimon, who is the owner of the object, he says, I never relinquish my ownership from it. This is my item, this is my object. The fact that it is in Reuven's possession, because he's a Ganav, he's a Gazlan. So what's the question? The question is, who can be Makdish, who can sanctify it, or who can designate it for Hekdesh to the Beit HaMikdash? Now, why am I asking that? Because in order to be makdish something to the Beit HaMikdash, in order to designate an item to the Beit HaMikdash, it needs to be that you are the owner. Obviously, I cannot come and say, I don't know, I'll pick on someone, or I'll pick on Paul. Okay, Paul, you know what? I'm be makdish your mishkafayim, your glasses to the Beit HaMikdash. It's not mine to be makdish.
How do you know I've been mityash?
No, I'm saying I just picked on you just to.
I know, but I'm giving it back to you.
Oh, okay. So how do you know that someone is mityash? Very good question. The answer for that is that b'sham'inan de amar vaili lecheson kis. That you hear him saying, "Oh, I lost it. It's gone. It's done." If you want to see an extensive discussion about it, which is really interesting, you can look at the Gemara in Baba Metzia in Daf Kaf Aleph, talking about Yehu Shelo Midat, this famous machloket between Abaye and Rava. So now, if we go back to the question, so the question is, who can designate it to the Beit HaMikdash? Which basically, what's the question behind it? Who is the real owner? Is the real owner is the one that has the item under his possession, or the owner is the one who the item belongs to? That's basically the question. This is and like in every question, and people who learn with me Ktubot and other things, we know that we need to try to understand what is the category that we are dealing with. There is Isur. There is a category of Isur, which means obviously it's prohibited to steal. Okay, that's one. B, there is a category of Hekdesh, which obviously is derived from who is the owner. So basically we have a question of ownership. How do you define an owner? And the third one is, what are the conditions, or what are what is needed to make a Hekdesh? And then you have another question of a monetary question, which is, if let's say Reuven can be makdishi to Beit HaMikdash, should he pay back to Shimon? Should we accept it? So we have all those questions in one little sentence. Everyone is with me? I didn't lose anyone? If you can open up your cameras, it would be wonderful, so I can even see your faces nodding or sleeping or eating breakfast, whatever it is. So that would be wonderful. Great.
Not eating breakfast.
Eating breakfast? No eating breakfast. Oh, okay.
No,
I have
no.
water.
Cooking for Shabbos.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's multitasking.
No lox and bagels anymore.
Right. So what's the answer? So he says, Shnehem einam yecholim leagdish. Both of them, Reuven and Shimon, they cannot designate this item to the Beit HaMikdash. Why? Ze lefi she'eino shelo. Reuven, the gazlan, cannot do it because really it's not his. Vezen, Shimon, the owner, lefi she'eino birshuto. Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan basically says, when Reuven stole it from Shimon and Shimon did not give up, was not mityaesh, basically the item is in limbo. There is no real owner. This guy Reuven cannot do it because it's not his to designate to Beit HaMikdash, and Shimon cannot do it because it's not in his possession. So it's like it stays, which means we are not allowing someone to be makdish something that it's not his, and to say, you know what, who cares? This gazlan, yeah, he did something wrong. Let him do another wrong thing. No, we stop it like that. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. So now the Gemara continues. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. So the Gemara says like that. Umi amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi? You want to tell me that that's what Rabbi Yochanan says? Ve'a amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kestam mishnah. But Rabbi Yochanan says that the halacha is like the simple understanding of the Mishnah, which is what? Vetnan, and this is the Mishnah. Kerem revai. Hayu metzainim oto bigzuzot adama. So before we go into understanding, to try to understand it, first introduction. What's the idea with Kerem revai? Kerem revai is that for the first 4 years, and I'm not getting into how you calculate the 4 years, okay? You can really calculate the 4 years, which is almost like a 3 years and maybe a month, but let's leave that aside. This is not the issue. I want to talk about the halachot of Kerem revai. For 4 years, you cannot eat from the fruits of that vineyard until what you need to do at the 4th year. You need to take the fruits to Yerushalayim to eat it there, or to redeem the fruits on coins and to take those coins to Yerushalayim. So now, basically, I have a kerem revai, I have a vineyard outside of my yard, and people go through. Question is, do I need to make a sign and says, please, only look, don't eat, because it's kerem revai. Now, people who are taking it are gazlanim. You are with me? This is my yard, this is my vineyard. Those are my grapes. The only thing is that I cannot eat them either because it's in the 4 years. Should I put a little sign and say, look guys, I don't want you to, you can look, you can take a picture, you can take a selfie with those grapes, but don't eat from it because it's in the middle of the Orla years. Should I do that? So the Mishnah says, everyone is with me because I know it's a little complicated, but okay, good. So the Gemara says, so metzainim oto bikzuzot adama. So what do you see from here? You see from here that what? That you need to make a sign. Don't touch it. It's in kerem revai. And the Gemara says, simana ki adama, ma adama ika ana amine, af hai nami ki mefarka shari lithanuye mine. So says Rashi, bikzuzot, נותן פיסת רגבים סביבות הגבולים, so he puts like a little boundary around, like a boundary, like a limit or a sign around the vineyard to show that everyone is kerem revai, להודיע שהוא kerem revai ואסור בלא פדיון, meaning don't touch it, don't take it, unless you take it later on and you need to redeem it. דאיכא אנא אמינא, לאחר זמן בחרישה וזריעה וקצירה, אף היינה מאיכא אנא אמינא, Befidyon. Okay, so basically the Gemara says that you need to show a sign that it's kerem revai. Af hai v'shel orla, and if you have orla, what is orla? Orla is that also something that you cannot right now eat. Becharsit. So if you have an etz, a tree, that also you need to wait for 4 years until you can really eat the fruits. You also need to what? To make a little sign with charsit, with like a type of earth to show that it's orla and you can't eat it. And the Gemara says, simana kecharsit, ma charsit she'ein ana hamine, af hai delet be ana amine. So why do you take pottery? Because pottery, you don't really have too much of enjoyment from it, and therefore from this tree, you also cannot really have enjoyment from it. V'shel kvarot, and if you have graves in your backyard, you also need to want to make a sign with seed, with a paint, to show that this is a grave. Why? Because you don't want people to do what? You don't want kohanim to go into your backyard. And the Gemara says, simana dechiver ke'atzamot. Why do you take white paint? So because that people are white, so that's what you do. Umemache v'shofer ki heiche denichvar tfei. Okay, so let's stop here for just a second. Basically, what does this Mishnah says? This Mishnah says what? That if I have a prohibition, if I have something that is prohibited, that has an isur, it can be kerem revai, it can be etz orla, it can be graves in my backyard and the kohanim are moving along. I need to what? To show that that's isur in order to prevent people from making a chet. You remember our first question. Here there is a preventive act that is expected of me, even though it's in my private yard. It's to make sure that what? That people do not commit a sin due to my actions.
Rabbi,
Now,
why would you...
just one second, who are those people? Gazlanim. Those are not regular people. This is not a vineyard that I put in Reshut HaRabim in the public domain, telling people, you know, I'm so kind and good-hearted, you can take whatever you want. No, this is in my yard. You come to my yard to eat. So on one hand, I should say, why should I put a sign? This is my yard. It says shetach prati, private territory. Don't come. So the idea is, which is very interesting, is that according to the Mishnah, you need to do what? You need to show, even to a gazlan, that, that he shouldn't take it. Okay. But it's not under dispute. אמר רבן שמעון בן גמליאל, במה דברים אמורים? בשביעית דהפקר נינו, אבל בשאר שני שבוע, אל ייתהו לרשע וימות. Wow. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, I disagree with this Mishnah. Only in the time of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year, when your private orchard or your private field is not really your private, it's public, everyone can come, only then you need to put signage. This is Orla, this is Kerem Revai, you can eat from this tree, you don't eat from this tree. But in the rest of the years, when it's not Shemitah, you don't need to. So if a gazlan, if Reuven comes along and eat from my tree, who is still Orla, let him eat, so he will be punished by God. For two things, for taking something that does not belong to him, and also eating something that is what? That it's prohibited. And what's the pasuk that he used? Al iteu la rasha veyamot, which means feed the evil person, so he should die. Now, so what do we have here? Now, this is very, very interesting. This is really becoming interesting. We have a major debate between Stam the Mishnah and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. What should be our approach towards people who are about to commit a sin? According to the Stam of the Mishnah, Tanakama, you need to what? You need to basically tell them, don't do it. I mean, you need to do whatever you can in order to what? To keep them away. Even though, by the way, just as a side note, if I put a signage and I put the sign and Reuven the Gazlan decides to take it, he is doing that what? B'meizid. Meaning I elevated his sin, because sometimes it's mutav yu shogegim ve'al ihiyu mezidim. Sometimes it's better for a person to violate something unwittingly or not knowing rather than knowing. But the Mishnah says you need to put a sign in order to try to prevent people from taking something or eating something that is prohibited. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, this is not your responsibility. If he is a gazlan and he comes to my orchard, he comes to my backyard in order to take fruits that does not belong to him, you know what? He should eat orla. He should eat something that is prohibited, so God will take care of him. So now let's stop. And now I'm going to open up for questions. If someone has a question, please unmute, ask, and then mute. Paul.
My question is, does somebody who owns a Reshut Prati, does he have to say, Zeh Shetach Prati, and anybody who comes in will be, I don't know, takes responsibility? I mean, this is even beforehand. Why are we stopping the Ganav in the first place? Why are we only dealing with the Orla? That's my question.
I think what we are talking about two things here. This guy wants to be a gazlan. Reuven is a gazlan. He's not a great guy. Question is, he can do all gzelot that he wants. Okay, that's his issue. The issue is, should I try to prevent him from adding another sin, which means when I put a sign on the orla tree, for example, this apple tree is still orla. I don't tell Reuven to come to my orchard or to take anything. He decided already to come. So maybe it's better if he comes, okay, he will steal a regular apple from a non-orla tree. So at least he does not violate another chet. We're not talking here about tzaddikim. We're talking here about reality, okay? The reality is that we don't have too many tzaddikim. We have only 36, perhaps maybe a little more. But the idea is that he already comes to steal. So the question is, should I try to reduce, to lower, to decrease the severity of the sin by doing something that, does not take so much time or too many efforts? Okay, just to say this is kerem revai, this is this and that, in order to prevent him from adding severity for his sin. Any other questions? Okay, so I need to, just 1 second, someone sends me in a chat, what if he steals because of abject poverty, not evil? Yeah, still, poverty is not a justification for stealing. So we can't, it's not Robin Hood. And then, I don't understand. The other one, I don't understand the English. There is some spelling mistakes here, so I can't read it.
Rabbi,
Yes.
implicit in all this is the notion that someone who's a gazlan might care about other kinds of sins more than his gazlanut. That kerem revai would be more important to him than the gazlan.
Okay, so Charles, you are bringing and really the core question. The core question is, when I tell you that you need to put signage on the tree to say it's Orla, is that for the gazlan or is that for you? That's the question. The question is, are we doing that for the individual, that he should not add to the severity of the sin? Or we are saying, no, as a society, we need to make sure that no one fails because of us. I don't care if he's the most tzaddik guy or he's the most Russia guy, okay? Meaning, is the obligation is in order to save him, or is the obligation so we know I can go to sleep knowing that I was not an obstacle to anyone? That's basically what it is, which I think this is really the core question here. Why are we doing what we're doing? And the idea, by the way, the idea of making sure that no one fails because of me also is very known as lifnei iver lo titen michshol. You should not put an obstacle in front of a blind person. Okay, not literally blind, but talking about blind that does not know. So the thing is, you need to make people aware. Now, what do they do with that? You know what? For example, we will see. You know what? I'll just throw a modern question. You are an owner of a restaurant, non-kosher restaurant. Doesn't say anywhere it's kosher. You know what? But you know the Jews will come. And I'm not talking about, eating fish with 2 wraps with an oven and, all the tricks that some people do. I'm talking about totally non-kosher. Can you own a restaurant like that, knowing the Jews will come? Okay? Because you are feeding them non-kosher food.
Can you open your restaurant on Tisha B'Av?
Okay, very good. Can you sell chametz on Pesach when you are owning a hotel, restaurant, whatever it is? So all those questions are deriving from here to some extent, to some extent, because the question is, what is really the idea here? Is the idea is the society, or is the idea is what is the individual? And to add to it, by the way, or to connect it to another issue that I think is very important, is like when we have, in Dinei Nezikim, in the laws of damages. There is a very interesting discussion in the Gemara, who needs to be marchik? Hanizak tzarich le'archik or hamezik? Meaning, if I set a fire in my backyard, okay, can I say, look, I don't really care. I can put the fire until my my border of my backyard, and who cares? Or should I say, look, I need to be careful. I cannot have the fire until the end of my backyard. I can have the fire until the middle of my backyard. Meaning, who's responsible, the damager or the one who is also damaged? If someone goes in the street and he sees a truck speeding, and there is a ma'avar chatzaya, there is a pedestrian walk that he can walk, and the light is green, but he sees that the truck is not going to stop. Should he continue walking? Saying, look, he needs to stop? Good luck. I mean, I think that will be his last thought of the day, okay? Meaning the idea here is that even though you might be right, you also need to be smart about it. So before I continue, I see some people, The
Yeah.
chat is not great for me because it distracts me to look on the other screen.
Rabbi,
So if someone
Rabbi,
would like to ask,
you-
that's the best way. So Elvin,
Rabbi, double question. Going back on the question that was just asked, are we saying we're talking about a Goslin? So we're saying there's got to be two steps. Number one, he's stealing, and then if you're talking about Shemitah or Orla. So what differentiates between just stealing and Shemitah and Orla? Then what if there's a third? Do you have to put a guard there? If, let's say, there's a third reason he couldn't take it, okay? So I don't understand why you have a level on top of a level. And the second question is
I don't understand the first one, Elvin. Before you go to the second, I don't understand the first question.
the first one is, it's the assumption is that it's private property, okay? So now that it's private property, you're saying gzela. But that's not good enough, you're saying. You need either Arla or Shvit or something
What do you
like
mean?
that.
What do you mean? What do you mean? It's not good enough. I don't understand. What does it mean? It's not good enough.
Well, what you said was that you don't need a,
Half a
the
banana
question
ready?
was, do you need a special sign? Why, if it's just private property and plain gazela?
Yeah, you fancy it on your bread.
Right.
So
My
if
half
it's
a banana, yeah.
second
Okay.
Qumran,
With your half bananas coming over, all right?
Yeah. I might not have it now. I might have it.
All right.
Well, 1 second. Elvin, only Elvin, please unmute.
Can people mute themselves, please?
Yeah, and Elvin, unmute. Elvin, you need to unmute.
okay.
Yes.
You're saying number one, if it was plain gazela, you don't need a sign. But if it's gazela and Arla, you do need a sign. What if it's gazela, Arla, and something else? Do you need a sign and a guard there? In other words, I'm
Okay.
just saying, that's number one question. Number two question is, you're talking about a Goslin. What about a person that's not a Goslin? And I'll give you an example. You're walking down on the country road and you see one apple tree after another apple tree. And it's not uncommon for a person to pick up an apple and eat it, okay? Should there be a sign there too?
Okay, very good. So so let's start with the first question. The first question is, no, there is a limit to how much we can expect people to do things. When we put Orla, and by the way, it's almost impossible to have double jeopardy, okay, double isurim. If it's a tree, it's Orla. If it's kerem, it's revai. So we really can't. But the answer is that, for example, if this, let's say, here I found for you an example, Alvin. If it's a fruitful tree during its Orla in my backyard, which is also a graveside for my relatives, okay? So then you need to have a signage on the tree and a sign on the kvarot, on the graves, okay? So it's not two signs on the tree. There is a sign for everything that you can fail or that you can commit a sin with. But we're not talking about hiring a guard and wasting money and things like that. So that's one. The second question that you asked was the idea of, what was the second question, Elvin? That was the Gazlan. Oh, if you are driving
a plain person.
Yeah, a plain person. So a plain person, for that, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that in the time of Shemitah, which means it's ownerless because it's hefker, then you need to put signage, which means it seems to be that if, for example, there are orchards everywhere, the owners will need to put, look, you can take, but just make sure don't take from this tree or that tree because this tree is Orla. Yeah, that's according to Rabban Gamliel, for sure. Now you can expand your question. There is a responsibility, let's say, from the government to do something like that? Let's say the government planted an orchard of apple trees, strawberries, whatever it is, okay? And the question is, should they also put a sign next to every tree saying, look, even though you can take from everything you want, still this tree and this tree is Orla. Okay, so basically what we have, and we will need to start moving forward a bit, so I would ask to hold on the questions, is that what we have now, this is only the Gemara. Do you see how exciting it is to learn Gemara, right? You see so many questions. First question is the preventive act of trying to deter people from adding already to their transgressions. That's A. B is the responsibility is to really help or save the individual, or is in order to create a society that knows that they did whatever they can that people don't have the opportunity to commit a sin. And then the third is what is the expectation? What is the expectation in a normal society in terms of relationships between individual and community? So that's the Gemara. So now let's go to the next source. And then I'll open it up again for questions, but I need to move on a little bit with the Rambam. So the Rambam says the following. ורבן שמעון בן גמליאל אומר, and רבן שמעון בן גמליאל says, שלא הצרכנו לרשום כרם רווי ועורלה כדי שלא יאכלו מהן. We don't need to put those signs. You know, this is a tree of orla, this is a vineyard of רווי, because some people can eat from them. We don't care. אלא בשנת השמיטה, only in the time of the sabbatical year of the שמיטה, שהיא הפקר. Because it's hefker, it's ownerless. ויד כל אדם פשוטה בגנות ובכרמים. And everyone take on Shemitah. Shemitah, it's ownerless, so everyone takes. Even the most tzaddik Jew takes fruits in the time of Shemitah, and therefore only then you need to have those signs. אבל שלא בשנת השמיטה, but in time of a regular year, אין צריך לציינן, there is no need to put those signs, לפי, because, שאין רשות לכל אדם לפשוט ידו ולאכול דבר שאינו שלו. There is no permission for people to take whatever they want. It's not yours. ומי שעבר ואכל, and if I did stretch my hand and took an apple without the permission of the owner, הרי זה גזלן. He is a thief. ואין לנו לעשות תקנה לגזלן כדי שלא ייכשל. We don't need to make enactments and anything to try to help a gazlan that he will not fail. מפני שעוון גזל חמור יותר, because גזל is more severe than other חטאים, ודברים אלו נכונים. This is an interesting thing. The Rambam is basically saying what? The Rambam says the idea of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is not against people. He is against Gazlanim. If you are a Gazlan, you decided to be a Gazlan, you decided to stretch your hand and to take from an apple that does not belong to you, I should do something for you? What you cooked, that's what you're going to eat. If you decided to be a Gazlan, mitzidi, from my point of view, you should eat orla. Why do I care? Now, so what does that mean? It means something very interesting. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is not against helping people, but people also need to help themselves. If you are not a Gazlan and you come and you want to eat from this tree in my private property, and you knock on the door and says, Rav Shai, can I eat from the apple? I will tell you, I don't know, Phil, I'll pick on you, you are in the middle of my screen. Okay, Phil and Fegi, sure you can, but only in 2 years from now, because now it's only the second year of the tree, so come in 2 years, okay? Or alternatively, I can give you apples from another tree. But if you decided to be a Gazlan, I have zero responsibility for you. You can continue to commit sins, I don't really care. Now, this is an interesting thing because there is a lot of psychology here. Think about it. That's why I want to discuss it with you. And I don't care if we're going to finish up the source sheet today or next week, or I have 16 source sheets for you, so we will be okay. The thing is, there is a psychological issue here too. If I'm a rabbi and we are a Beidin and we look at society and we know the reality is that people commit sins, ma lasot. The question that we are asking ourselves is, what can we do to prevent them from doing so? So on one hand, I can hear, we should not make any leniencies for thieves because it will only encourage them. It will justify what they do. We don't want it. We're going to say, if you decide to be a Gazlan, we don't care about you. You can go from one place to another, one sin to another, and we don't care. That will discourage him to be such a Rasha. On the other hand, I can hear people say, no, that's not true. I might be a Gazlan, that's true, but you have nothing to do with it. You, the owner, need to do whatever you can that I do not increase the severity of my sin. You cannot make my calculations, my spiritual calculations, okay? You need to do what you need to do. It's like, you know what? I'll bring you a question. You have a vicious dog in your yard, vicious. Should you put a sign, a vicious dog in the property? Because on one hand, you say, if you are not invited, you know what? Maybe you should meet the dog first. On the other hand, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I just got into your property somehow, and now I need to be attacked by your dog. So that's the question. I can hear both sides. I can hear one opinion say, look, I don't need to put a sign. If you are not invited, don't come. And if you come, on your own expense. On the other hand, I can say, look, some people, sometimes you don't read it, sometimes you don't see, sometimes you got to somewhere, put a sign. So this is, according to the Rambam, the idea of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. So what Tanna Kama thinks? Tanna Kama thinks that what? That even when someone is a gazlan, maybe meaning he's already in a position or in a condition that it's not exactly great, we still need to do whatever we can to try to help him out and not to add to the severity of his chataim, of his sins. Phil, I think you wanted to ask something before.
Oh, okay. Two things. What about Shogeg and Mazik? If he could be a ganav, but he's the taking orla is a greater sin. So basically, by telling him, you're making him more liable because he's going to eat it. He's a guzzler. So our duty, maybe the business, it's better that he should die. Better he should not know and therefore be shogeg. You're making him mazid.
Right. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier that I said that when you put a sign, you also take the risk of what? Of increasing the severity of his sin, because knowingly he's going to eat from those fruits. But the other side is that even a gazlan, when he sees such a sign, he will say, you know what, I'm not touching it. Okay. So it also depends on our perception of people who chose to take not exactly the pious path. Meaning how much a person is willing to do. You know what? Let's digress for a second. We all know the story from Tanakh with Izevel. You remember in Achav and Navot and the vineyard of Navot?
Mm-hmm.
And Achav did something that no one did before him. Haratzachta gam yarashta.
Yeah.
He not only murdered Naval, he also inherited him, which is like the most corrupt thing on earth. Even who was that? Eliyahu couldn't believe it, which means I understand people can murder, but they're not going to inherit the guy. Okay, meaning there are limits to how many. I mean, that's why you have people who are, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, third-degree murder. There is always a question: if a person already chose the wrong path, how far he or she will go with that path? And that's social perception, psychology, sociology, your religious perspective, how are you an optimistic person, a pessimistic person, how much faith you have in people. I mean, the Gemara is also asking the same question. If someone, for example, is chashud ala mamon, chashud ala shavua. If someone is a thief, can you still believe him when he take an oath in Beit Din? Debate in the Gemara. Because the fact that I did one thing wrong does not mean that everything I'm going to do wrong. Maybe I have a yetzer hara for stealing, but when you tell me to take an oath with the name of God, ma pitom chas v'shalom, I will never do that.
There is a modern case that mirrors this in a different way. A thief climbed up on the roof of a house and fell through the transom. It opened up. Below, he landed on a spike because the Balabayat had a spike placed in the middle of his table for this case. Now, this is a true story. and the Ganef sued for the fact that in the Geneva business, you are entitled to fall through transoms, but not to have a spike. So there's a similarity about modernity and this problem.
Yeah. Look, we can. I mean, I'll bring some other cases, but it's true. There is this question, and I want to show you. This is human condition, and that's what the Gemara discussed. Meaning, how far a person would go. Question number one. Question number two is, what should be my assumption as a kehillah? And this is the main question. Okay, from Phil, we go to Paul, if I'm not mistaken. He raised his hand.
Sorry, but the first quotation starts off Rabbi Yochanan and Halacha Kistam Mishnah. Now, Rabbi Yochanan was a different generation to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it a problem of a change in attitude between two generations, or is Rabbi Yochanan saying that this is the halacha? This is we don't accept any other opinion because this is a Stam Mishnah.
Okay, so the thing is that according to the Rambam, it seems to be that v'zeh nachon, which means he holds like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel for now, and the fact that there is, more than probably 2 generations, probably, or even a little bit more, it might be that social circumstances changed, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, look, we are going to prevent gazlanim because we're not going to help them out, so they can just disappear. We don't care. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, we need to really fight for every Jew and try to do things, even for gazlanim. It might be, but we obviously, when we claim something like that, we will need to bring a substantial proof for the transformation in generations. Okay, so that's what we will need to do.
Rabbi,
Okay.
can I segue on that for a second?
Sure.
I think that this position may reflect a very interesting hashkafic perspective, meaning that halacha should be based on normative behavior of society. So what is the normative behavior? So normative behavior is during Shvi, if there's an issue of Shvi, where people, can, or during Shemitah, people can eat, you need to then let them know that this is not to be eaten. However, the normative behavior during non-Shemitah years is that people don't steal. Therefore, the halacha reflects that that's what the normative behavior. So we assume that people are not going to steal. Therefore, there is no requirement to assume that others will steal, will get involved in gezel. So it could be that others may have a different perspective and say, no, we believe that people are generally bad, and therefore we need to create halacha based on that assumption. Or no, we believe people are generally good, and we therefore create our halacha based on that perspective. So I think that's an interesting hashkafic dialectic here with regard to that.
Yefeh. Harold, I think you're right, and I will add to it. You see it in many other places in the Talmud as well. For example, Mar'it Ain, or Hezek Reiyah, that you need to build a wall together to separate between your yard and your friend's yard so they don't look. So what's the assumption? That people do look. And if they do look, maybe there is a problem. Or the assumption is that people don't look. Meaning, we are dealing with people. We are dealing with normative behavior. We are dealing with not normative behavior, abnormal behavior. And who defines what is normal and what is not normal? Society? Beit Din? The Times Magazine? I mean, who is the one to really define what is normal behavior and what is abnormal behavior of people? So those are the questions that obviously the rabbis had to deal with, different generations, different circumstances. And I heard what Harold said, which is an interesting idea, that really the halacha fit the behavior, the current behavior of that society. So now we are jumping to the 16th century. Rav Yosef Karo. We are talking about Ilchot Avodat Kochavim. Now, one of the major things, before that I will give you a little bit of an introduction. one of the major Jewish businesses, especially in Europe, from probably 14, 15, probably even more in the Middle Ages, was to provide religious articles to the church. Jews were very good at it. They sold crosses, and they sold wine, and they sold bread, and they sold all sorts of things, and obviously a fabric for the church. And the question is, how can they do that? How they can make a profit from selling something to the Christian church, to the Catholic church? So that was major business in Europe, obviously less in Eretz Israel, because in Eretz Israel in the 16th century, it was not that big of a business. So the Shulchan Aruch says like that. It's really the Rama. Rabbi Moshe Isservish had to deal with that, and he says like that. יש אומרים, אסור למכור להם דברים השייכים לעבודתם, היינו דווקא אם אין להם אחרים כיוצא בו, או שלא יוכלו לקנות במקום אחר. אבל אם יכולים לקנות במקום אחר, מותר למכור להם כל דבר. So, ויש מחמירים, and some people are stringent about it, ונהגו להקל כסברה ראשונה, וכל בעל נפש יחמיר לעצמו. Okay. So we have here a prime example of indecisive posek. Now, I'm not going, God forbid, to say bad things on the Ramah, not at all, have my tremendous respect, but it's not an indecisive psika, it's a complicated psika. It's a wonderful psika. What do I mean by that? Again, question is, can a Jew sell items for Avodah Zarah or items of Christian articles to the church? What's the problem? Why do I care? Because there is what they call Isur Mesayea. We know that non-Jews also should believe in one God. And if you are helping them not to believe in one God by practicing really, I mean, talking about like ideal Catholic Church ideology, so you are helping them to believe not only in one God. So you can't do that. So the Rama says, look, some people are lenient. They are allowing the Jews to do it. Why? Because if the Jews will not do it, they can get it from somewhere else, from another non-Jew. So therefore, if the church has options, so then you are not the Messiah. You are not helping them. Why? Because they can get the help from someone else. So if they can get the help from someone else, why not to get money from it? At least so you can sell it to them. Everyone is with me? Okay. Then there is another opinion that says, no, you shouldn't do it. It's Messiah. You are helping them. Says the Rama, v'nahagu lehakel, which means the custom is, or the practice is, that they were lenient, meaning people in Europe, especially in Poland, and probably in the area, they had the practice to be lenient. Why? Because it was a good business. They made money. And the rabbis couldn't take that money because it's not a clear cut that it's asur. However, says the Rama, Ba'al nefesh yachush. But if you are a pious person, you should be concerned with it and you shouldn't do it. So now I want to ask you a question, which is obviously an interesting one. So if I do it, I do sell it. So I'm not a Baal Nefesh? I'm not a good guy? Or I am a good guy? It depends. It depends on your financial circumstances. If you can do another business or you can make money with something else, then don't do it. But if you must, you can. What do we see from here? Now, this is a little bit of a different take, but I think it's important. You have a Jew who is making money from something that it might be wrong. And what do? You make a takana for him. You say, you know what? Because the church can buy those items from someone else, no, it's not exactly Messiah. It's not exactly great, but it's okay. So basically, we as a Beidin allowing a Jew to do something that it's debateful. So now that's an interesting thing. Now, we are not choshesh, we are not concerned that you are going to worship in church because you sell them items. That's not our concern. But we are allowing a Jew to do something that is not exactly the best because of what? Of financial need. And now anyone who knows a little bit of history about European Jews, it was very important that they will be financially secured. And therefore, the rabbis were well attuned to the reality. But now, if we continue on, we see something interesting. The Shach says, this is a generation after the Rama, and he says like that, דסבירלה, דחייכי דאמרינן בש"ס, גבי נזיר, דאסור להושיט לו כוס יין, דהיינו דווקא בדקאי בתרי עברי נהרה. הוא הדין הכה. ויש מחברים וסוברים דמכל מקום איסור מדרבנן איכא, אפילו לא הווי כמו תרי עברי נהרה, וכל זה לדעת הרב, אבל לפי עניות דעתי דלא פליגי. דכולי עלמא מודים לאמור דכי ותוספות בפרק כמה דעבודת כוכבים, דבעובד כוכבים או מומר שרי. והגאות מימוניות ותוספות והראש בפרק כמה דשבת והר"ן, מה יראה בישראל שהוא חייב להפרישו מאיסור? ודכתב הראש, שלא גרם מישראל קטן אוכל נבלות שבית דין מצווים להפרישו, כל שכן ישראל גדול, מה שאין כן בעובד כוכבים בישראל מומר שאינו חייב להפרישו. So, he wants to claim like that. He said, it seems to be that the debate between the two opinions regarding Jews selling religious items or religious articles to the church, he wanted to say that their machloket is there is Isur Derabanan or there is no Isur Derabanan, because on one hand, the church can get those items from somewhere else, so I'm not giving it to them. On the other hand, some people say it's Isur Derabanan. So the Shach says, you know what? Maybe we can understand it a little bit differently. The question is, with the Goy, with the non-Jew, there is, according to everyone, says the Shach, and I'll just bring it up. According to them, Be'oved Kochavim or Mumar, a Jew who converted to Christianity, you are allowed to sell it to them. The only thing is about Israel, שהוא חייב להפרישו מאיסור. Meaning the question is not so much about are you allowing to sell them. The thing is about the Jew himself. Should you try to prevent a Jew from doing something wrong? And this is our question from the beginning. Do we need to do whatever we can to prevent a Jew from doing something wrong? Now, to elaborate on it and to make it clear, I want to see the next source, and then we will open up for some questions. Should Bet Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Yehuda Bereb Chaim Shmelkish, in Galicia, in the beginning of the 19th century. And what's the question? על דבר השאלה, what's the question? אם מותר למכור בבתי משקאות מאכלות אסורות לישראלים חשודים האוכלים. וכן, אם מותר למכור מאכלי היתר לאוכלים שם בבירור בלי נטילת ידיים ובלי ברכה, גם בדבר הנותנים לחשודים הנ"ל דבר אכילה בשכר פעולתם. So what is question? His question is, are you allowed to sell non-kosher drinks in a bar when you know the Jews will come and drink it? And also, are you allowed to sell in a restaurant to Jews who are not observant because they're going to eat and they're not going to wash their hands, they're not going to say a bracha? Can you have them coming to your restaurant? And also, if you know that you feed your employees with food, not with money, can you give food to your employees when they will not wash their hands? If it's bread and they're not going to say a bracha, can you give it to them? Interesting questions. By the way, I know what you are thinking. It's like, if I'm having a kosher restaurant, I need to have a sign, only if you are religious, you can come in, right? So, now they check your temperature for the corona, they check your stuff for security, and also I'm going to check your religiosity, how religious you are. right? Are you going to wash your hands? Are you going to make a bracha? What bracha? Okay, right? So obviously it's a little bit almost impossible, but I don't care about the probability of the question. I care about the core question. Because what's the core question? The core question is, is there something that you need to do in order to prevent Jews from committing sins? That's the question. That's 19th century. So he says the following, והנה בדבר, הנותנים לחשודים על נטילת ידיים וברכה מאכל בשכרם. Now, what about my employees? That in exchange of their service, I give them food, and I know that they are not going to say any brachot on that or anything like that. אולי זה דומה לשמש דאסור ליתן לו. Maybe it's like a shamash that you are not allowed to give. Shamash is like a meltzar, like a waiter, that you are not allowed to give him in exchange of his service food if you know that he's not going to say a bracha. אבל גם שם כתב בטור רק לתוך פיו. Says you are not allowed to give it to his mouth, but you're allowed to give it to him, and he does whatever he wants with it. וגם יש לחלק אמת, ויש להשתפק בשיטת השח, שכתב שמומר, אין אנחנו מצווים להפרישו. אם כוונתו דווקא במומר ממש, אבל מומר לדבר אחד, אנחנו חייבים להפרישו מאותו דבר. והנראה לי דהנה דגון מרבבה תמה על השח. בפשיטות עמי במומר אינו חייב להפרישו. וכתב בדעת השח משום דעושה איסור במזיד אינו חייב להפרישו. So, we do not, one second and then I will translate. ולדעתי, דעת השח נכון בפשיטות, על פי דברי רבן שמעון בן גמליאל. במה דברים אמורים בשביעית, אבל בשאר שני שבוע, רשעו לישר וימות, אף על גב דאיסור כרם הווי ושוגג, מכל מקום כיוון דל איסור גנבה ומזיד, אינו חייב להפרישו אף על שאר איסור, וכל שכן על איסור שהוא מומר. Okay, so I know I read a lot, so I'm going to explain. He says, you are allowed to have non-observant Jews coming to your restaurant, kosher restaurant, even if they're not going to wash their hands, they're not going to say a bracha, you are allowed to give it to your employees. And why? First, when you give it to them, it doesn't mean that they are going to eat it. You know what? For example, I'll ask you a question. How many of you do some grocery shopping on Tisha B'Av? Okay, we get the bagels in the morning, right? Okay, you get the bagels in the morning of Tisha B'Av. Okay, you finish kinot and you go and get a bagel. Wonderful. Should the bagel macher, okay, we'll call him the bagel macher. Okay, does the bagel macher should not sell it to you because you might eat it now? Obviously not. Even, maybe we should give them ideas, but even the badats will not take away the kashrut certification from groceries that sell food on Tisha B'Av, right? We should maybe call them and give them another idea, but I'm not sure we would like it. So the thing is that there is a difference between taking food and feeding it to someone and another case of, here is the food, take it. Now, what you're going to do with that, it's none of my business. You might learn about brachot, you might give it to someone else. I cannot assume what you are doing with the food. So therefore, he says, we don't care. Which means if you decide to be a gazlan and then not to make a bracha and then to eat non-kosher, it's not my business. Live and let live to some extent, okay? This is not my business. My business is selling kosher food. You don't want to say a bracha? Don't say a bracha. You know what? Let me further the question for today, 21st century. How many religious Jews, they are not that careful with brachot or with netilat yadayim and whatever. And they, I don't know, now we do mishlochim. So we shouldn't do mishlochim until we check, the deliveries. So we shouldn't do a delivery from a restaurant, from a takeaway restaurant to a family unless we know that this family is a religious family that's going to say all the brachot in the world. But the idea or the issue here is even more than that. It's now you see the question shift to what is my responsibility as an owner of a restaurant, of a society, for every individual? Do I give them the freedom to do whatever they want? That's their choice. I need to sell kosher. I'm not telling you not kosher. What are you going to do with it? You want to take this food and eat it on Yom Kippur? It's your decision. So we definitely, I didn't check it. I assume that there is probably somewhat of a shift between the, the beginning of the Middle Ages and obviously to the modern times, when you see that the empowerment of the individual and the freedom of the individual becomes obviously something that it's becoming more and more important. So the poskim could not be oblivious to it. But I think that in the beginning of the 19th century, we don't talking about yet about freedom. But the thing is that he says, look, I do what I can do. I'm selling you kosher food. I'm giving you food in exchange of your service. What you're going to do with that, your business, not mine. And then he continues on and he says, ואף במומר לדבר אחד משאר עבירות, ניידי בוודאי בלפני עיוור עובר, ואין ראוי, מבבא קמא, דשם הוא אינו עושה מאומר, רק הרשע עושה מעצמו, עם כל זה, אם אינו עובר בלפני עיוור, דלא הווי בתרי עברי דנהרא, אין איסור משום מסייע, ועליתהו לרשע. ולפי זה בנידון דידה נהי, דבוודאי, אם ספק שישמע לו מחויב להזהיר לכל הקונים שיתלו ידם ויברכו, אם יודע בוודאי שלא ישמעו, אין לאסור מלמכור. So he says at the end something very interesting. He says, look, you should encourage them to wash their hands, to say the bracha and everything. But if you know that it's not going to help or they're not going to do it, don't say a word. So how do you open up a restaurant which is kosher and can have non-religious people? You have a washing station and you say netilat yadayim. You can have birkonim, but you don't tell a guy, did you order bread? Okay, I can't give you the bread until you wash your hands. That's bad business, okay? But the idea is that basically in the 19th century, the beginning of the 19th century, he says, you need to make sure that you provide kosher food. Obviously, you sell kosher food. You provide the opportunity for people to wash their hands, to say the brachot, everything else, but you cannot force it on people. And it's not considered as lifnei iver lo titen michshol. It's not considered like you are putting an obstacle before them. They know exactly what they do. A. B, if you're going to nudge them, that's I'm saying now, they're going to go to a different restaurant. Don't nudge them. And the other restaurant might not be kosher. So the thing is, however, and this is where I am going, you know what, let's see the Khatam Sofer, and then I'll conclude and I'll leave you with a question. Because the Khatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer in Hungary, he said something interesting. The question was, it says, בשעה in Eruvin Kaf Aleph, it says, בשעה שתיקן שלמה עירובין, when Shlomo instituted the עירוב ונטילת ידיים, יצאה בת קול ואמרה, אם חכם בני, ישמח ליבי גם אני. If you are smart, I also going to rejoice in you. והקשה תוספות, הוא גם שניות תיקן. But one second, שלמה המלך created 3 enactments. One is עירובין, B is נטילת ידיים, C is שניות לעריות, which means the second round of women, that family members that you are not allowed to be with. So why it's not mentioned here? ויש לומר, לפי הנ"ל, במה שהוסיף חומרה לאיסור שניות, אף על גב שהוא מצווה לעשות סייג לתורה, מכל מקום לא שייך ישמח ליבי, כי אולי ייכשלו בזה בני אדם שאינם הגונים. אבל כשעשה סייג לשמירת שבת וגם עשה תיקון שלא יקלקלו בו, היינו שיערבו עירובין, אז ישמח ליבי גם אני. And this is something that I want to expand on for just really a second. And then I will let you go with the question. The Gemara in Eruvin says that David HaMelech was very happy and Hashem was very happy with Shlomo 2 enactments. One is Eruvin and the second is washing your hands. The Khatam Sofer is asking, but just one second. The Khatam Sofer also, the Shlomo HaMelech also did one more enactment, which was what? Shniyot la'arayot. meaning that you are not allowed to have sexual relationships with your aunt, your whatever, not only the 7 immediate relatives. So why it was not included in the list? Good question, right? Are you with me? Okay. So the Khatam Sofer is answering his own question by saying, you know what? It's a chumrah. And there are some people who are not able to keep it. So chumrah that a lot of people cannot keep it, I'm not sure I'm happy with it. It can cause them to commit a sin. Eruvin is good, it's for Shabbat. Netilat Yadayim most people can do, but those things, especially about sexual relationships, when some people will fail, I'm not sure that I can tell you that I'm happy with your chumrah. Now, what is behind this statement? Causing people to fail because you want to be more stringent, it's not a reason for happiness. Which is very interesting and has tremendous modern ramifications. You want to be stringent to yourself, God bless you. But if you are causing stringency that cause other people to commit a sin, ooh, I'm not sure that I'm so happy with you, says Hashem to Shlomo HaMelech, according to this Gemara in Eruvin. So what do we have here? And this is what I'm going to leave you with a question for next week, Bezrat Hashem. We see that the idea of, yes, I do have arvut. We are guarantors for each other. We do have responsibility for each other, but to what extent? It's not only about the question of ocheach tochiach et amitecha, about rebuke and to try to inspire all Jews to be religious. It's more than that. It's reading people. I can try to inspire everyone to do this one, and I can do a lot of stringencies and to get here. But if the people are here, what am I doing? I'm causing them to commit sins, unnecessary sins, really, because if I will not make this enactment, it will never be a prohibition, and I'm causing them issues. So what I would like us all to think about for next week, Bezrat Hashem, and not next week, next shiur, Bezrat Hashem, we will continue with this subject and we will expand on this subject. By the way, next time will be something really, you will be shocked. You will be shocked what we will deal with. What happened in Jewish communities. Okay, too much for nostalgia. So the thing is to really think about other examples that you know of, other cases that you know of, that you see this kind of tension between the individual and the community, tension between religious aspirations and reality, tension about the responsibility of trying to prevent someone to add to the severity of the sin. And this is a slippery slope, there is no question. It's very difficult. One of the most difficult things really to make a decision as a rabbi. It's not clear cut. You don't know the future ramifications. You don't know what kind of message do you send. Some people can look at it like that. Some people can look at it in a different way. So there is so much to talk about. And therefore, you'll have something to talk about on Shabbat. It's a long Shabbat, Baruch Hashem. I mean, it's a short Shabbat, but you have a long Friday. So no one goes to sleep immediately at 6 p.m. So at least until 9 p.m. you'll have something to talk about. With that, I will leave you and have a wonderful Shabbat.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.